Hello class, welcome back. So at this point, everybody should have finished writing project 1. So congratulations on finishing the most challenging and also the longest project for this semester. For the major tasks for this week, first you are going to complete the reflection for writing project 1. So this is not only just to do the reflection for writing project 1, it is also to partly fulfill the requirement of writing project 4, the reflective statement. So the way I designed this course is that after each of the writing projects, you are going to write 150 to 200 word reflection. And then when we reach the last week of our semester, you put together your reflective statement for writing project 1, 2, 3 together. You will already have a 500 word reflective statement. So this is to reduce the workload that you are facing for the final week. I know all of you must have been taking other courses, might have like other exams coming up, deadlines or projects due. So every time you submit the reflections, make sure that you save it as a Word or PDF document and then put it together. You will just submit it as part of writing project 4. Another major task for writing project 2, and as we all know, writing project 1 takes the most time, it is also for you to give you ample time to get familiarized with the pacing of this course. And starting from writing project 2, the pacing would be a lot quicker, and we are going to very quickly move on from project to project. So for writing project 2, let's look at the writing project description first and see what is required by the standard syllabus, all right? So writing project 2 basically is a rhetorical analysis. For people who have taken ENC 1101, you have already done a rhetorical analysis of a speech, right? Whether it's Malcolm X or Thunberg or President Roosevelt, right? For ENC 2135, the rhetorical analysis is a little bit different. It's kind of like taking you to another level. So for ENC 2135, the rhetorical analysis requires you to choose one text-based artifact and one non-text-based artifact, for example, a movie, a podcast, a photograph, anything that is not using text or writing as a major way of communicating to the audience. And by comparing across genres, you will have a better understanding of how genre conventions affect different writers' choices, composers' choices. And I think this is just similar to the ENC 1101, but taking it to another level and making it a little bit more challenging. But it also gives you more freedom, right? For ENC 1101, you have to choose from the 3 given tests, right? But for writing project 2, basically you can choose for ENC 2135, you can choose any artifacts that are interesting to you. So what is an artifact? Artifact is something that is composed by an author to convey message, to serve a kind of rhetorical purpose. So, and I know that for the standard syllabus, there are 4 writing projects, and it's not a very easy task. For this semester, you have to write a lot of words. So to kind of like help you get some of the workload off for writing project 2, and as I have already mentioned, all the writing projects are actually continuous. They are not standalone, separate projects. They're actually building on each other. So for writing project 2, you have to choose one text-based artifact, right? So you are welcome and you are allowed to choose one text-based artifact, for example, one scholarly article that you have used, you have analyzed in the annotated bibliography for writing project 1, and you want to expand on your rhetorical analysis, feel free to use what you have for writing project 1 as a kind of basis toward writing project 2. But if you say like, I do not like any of the secondary sources I use in the annotated bibliography, it's just for the research project. For writing project 2, I want to analyze a poem or a short story. I think it is more fun, or a chapter of a novel, my favorite novel. Of course, you can do that, right? So it's completely up to you. So for writing project 2, it is a rhetorical analysis, and later into this lecture, I'm going to talk about what is a rhetorical analysis and what is required and common mistakes that previous students have made for writing project 2. Basically, it asks you that, like for writing project 1, you have conducted investigative research into a particular topic, right? For writing project 2, you are going to continue exploring this particular topic, and then you are going to choose 2 artifacts from this field. One text-based artifact, as I have mentioned, for example, scholarly article, book chapter, any kind of publication that uses text as a basic medium for communication. And one non-text based artifact, which is a little bit more challenging. So in this week and next week's lecture, we are going to focus more on how to analyze a non-text based artifact. For example, a movie clip or a meme, right? So rather than analyzing the text explicit statement, you will be considering how any feature of the artifact might function in a rhetorical manner. So what does that even mean, right? So basically it's very easy. Sometimes the most common mistake students make for writing project 2 is that they only summarize. Okay, so this particular chapter is about A, B, and C, and D, and E, and that's the major argument, and then moving on to the movie, the director, like plot 1, plot 2, scene 1, scene 2, that's it. For rhetorical analysis, that is not enough. So focus not only on what is said, you also have to focus on how it is said. That is the how part that is most important. So for example, the most common rhetorical analysis that we have encountered in daily life might be a book review, right? For example, if we are looking for something for our summer reading list and we do not know what books we want to choose, we go to New York Times magazine, and they give all kinds of book reviews conducted by experienced writers. So for a sample book review, the first task, of course, give you a synopsis, right? What is being said in the book? But do we stop it from here? That's just one synopsis, right? So for common book reviewers following the genre conventions, they also have to talk about how the plot is being conveyed, how the message, the themes are explored, and then do an evaluation. Is the book good? Is the plot good? Is the characterizations, effective? Is it appealing? Is it worth reading, or is it just boring and that's not worth, your time of reading, right? So this is called a rhetorical analysis. Not only do you want to summarize or, explain to your readers what is said, what is being said in those artifacts, you also have to do an analysis of what kind of rhetorical strategies did they use and to what kind of effect did they achieve. So for example, if this particular photograph uses stunning contrast color to use pathos to kind of arouse certain feelings, does that help the photographer achieve to ultimately deliver the message that they want to deliver, right? Or maybe the stark contrast of the color only distract the audience from the major message, right? Do evaluations. So here you are not only the reader, the audience, but also a kind of like critic. You are going to criticize. You are going to analyze whether it is effective or not by pointing out what rhetorical strategies the author have used. And then you have your own ideas, right? Be critical. Is it effective? Can you learn something from that? Or maybe it's not that effective, right? For example, some movies have very bad reviews, right? But the reviewers, the critics, they also have to give a good kind of like reasoning of why it is bad, right? If you give a 3-star to this, movie, then you have to analyze, you have to explain why do you think the rhetorical strategies is ineffective and it achieves opposite effect, right? So basically that is what it called like analyze features of artifacts, how they function in a rhetorical manner. All right. So basically, in the next few weeks, we are going to talk a little bit more about, we are going to introduce more rhetorical terms, for example, genre conventions, context, rhetorical appeals, exigence, medium constraint, to help you figure out what are the major rhetorical strategies, like the chosen articles, the chosen artifacts you have chosen, have effectively or ineffectively employed. All right, so let's move on to some basic terms for you to understand what is required for writing project 2. The first one is rhetorical analysis, like I have already said. In our daily life, there are actually a lot of rhetorical analysis, right? For example, book review, film report, all kinds of analysis that is based on the artifacts, like the rhetorical strategies, is called a rhetorical analysis. Sometimes in the museums, for the pre-word or like all those explanations of the artifacts of the artist's work is also a rhetorical analysis. So it always starts from what is said, what is painted, what is sculptured, and what is conveyed, and then move on to how it is said, painted, or conveyed, and do an evaluation of how effective those rhetorical strategies are. Secondly, what is an artifact? We always talk about text-based artifacts, non-text-based artifacts. So artifact is kind of like a particular, a particular rhetoric that the writer or the composer have composed to achieve certain purpose. For text-based artifacts, there are like books, journals, articles, scripts, movie scripts. Non-text-based artifacts, you can choose from like movie clip, a short TED talk, painting, sculptures, meme, podcast, or a pie chart, a figure, anything that is not relying solely on text. So for example, for the TED Talks, they also have like captions, they also have text, right? But the authors, the speakers also use, voice. There are like sound effects, they use visual aid to achieve certain effects, so it's not solely text-based. All right, so structure for a rhetorical analysis, this is something to give you a basic idea of what you're going to do for writing project 2. So first is introduction. So for the introduction, of course, you have to explain to our readers what is the popular issue that you have chosen, right? That is based on writing project 1. And then you also have to analyze, you also have to introduce. So what are the two artifacts you are going to compare, right? Point out the genre, sometimes you also have to point out the author or the name of the artifacts. And then you're going to, sometimes you want to summarize the most important rhetorical features of the artifacts and their, the author's desired effects. And then for the body parts, you can compare and contrast a few rhetorical features that you want to analyze, like comparing a painting to a paper. And sometimes you can analyze it by artifacts. From artifacts A, artifacts A use 3 basic rhetorical strategies, and then move on to artifacts B. Artifacts B also use 3 major rhetorical strategies, and then after analyzing those artifacts separately, you do a compare and contrast section. So there are not a fixed structure, but there are a few things that you want to start to work from. And then the conclusion is also like summarizing your argument. So why is it important to conduct rhetorical analysis across genres? How does those genre conventions and all those genre strategies influence the particular rhetorical effects that those artifacts have achieved? All right, so for writing project 2, you can introduce, so research topic, what are the 2 artifacts, and then you can, so this is one example of structuring rhetorical writing project 2's rhetorical analysis. And then you can conduct rhetorical analysis of first artifacts, starting from what is said, combining with how it is said, and then rhetorical analysis of the second artifacts. And next we can also do a compare and contrast because the 2 artifacts are very different, so they might achieve very different effects. They all have their genre constraint. They also have their genre affordances. Constraint means that there are certain limitations of genres, right? Different genres have things that they can easily achieve, but because of genre convention, sometimes they're restricted from achieving other kind of effects. And then conclusion is that what did you learn from conducting, all those analysis of the 2 artifacts? All right, so next we are going to talk about one particular rhetorical concept. We are going to introduce another key term. So for writing project 1, we talk about discourse community, right? For writing project 2, there are a few more rhetorical terms that I'm going to introduce. The first one is rhetorical situation. So rhetorical situation is very important in developing genres and genre conventions. And why is that? So what is a rhetorical situation? So for composition studies, we define rhetorical situation as a repeated situation where a rhetoric or writing happens. And for the basic elements of rhetorical situation, there is supposed to be an author. So somebody has to write something or speak about something, somebody have to initiate the act, right? And then there are also subjects, right? So audience who listens to or read the artifacts that you have composed or listen to the speech, right? That could also be discourse community that we have learned from writing project 1. And then there are also particular settings, right? There are medium, mode, there are time and space, there are all kinds of different kind of settings that the rhetoric has occurred. And there are also purpose. So for the author, they do not write something or make a speech in vain, right? They also have to serve certain rhetorical purpose. And how to achieve those purposes, they have to use all kinds of rhetorical appeals and strategies. For example, basic 3 rhetorical appeals we are going to learn is ethos, logos, pathos, using different ways to help the author achieve the purpose to move the audience to conduct certain acts, right? All right, one basic rhetorical situation that I'm going to use an example is like, for example, for writing project 2, you unfortunately you or like one of your close friends got sick and you have to take care of them, and then that takes up a lot of your time, and then you find out that you cannot meet the deadline, and 2 days before the deadline you want to ask for an extension. That is a rhetorical situation, right? So who is the author? You are the author. Who is the subject? Professor. You have to write an email or write a letter to the professor, right? And the purpose, of course, is to ask for extension so that you can have more time to finish writing project 2 so that you can get a better grade, right? And this is not a standalone rhetorical situation because things have happened in the past too. There are previous students who cannot meet the deadlines, who face the same kind of dilemmas, and then in future classes there must be students who are going to face the same rhetorical situation. So this is a kind of a repeated situation. And students in the past, they have to figure out what particular genre that they want to use to communicate to the professor that could be more, like efficient way and also effective way. So for example, you can test the professor, but a lot of professors do not leave their cell phone numbers, personal information in the syllabus. So you cannot find the professor and going to the professor's office. Sometimes it takes time, maybe the professor's office hour has already passed, and then talking in person might be very daunting. Or you can write a letter and put it in the mailbox of the professors, but it might take the professor a week to read the letter. Also, letter is a little bit too formal. So the students find out that, okay, email is a very good genre that you can choose to use. Write an email is professional, it's a workplace, commonly used tool, right? And in the email, it's fast, it's like time efficient, and then you can also thoroughly explain your situation. That's called genre, right? So first, we know that to deal with a situation that you want to ask for extension, most people choose to use the genre of writing an email, and then people find it to be the most effective, and then students start to follow that kind of convention. And then in the email, so that is called genre conventions. And how does genre conventions take place? So in the email, students, through trials and errors, they want to find out, so what is the most important information to put in the email so that we can more successfully persuade the professors, right? You can post a photo, you can post a video, you can add music, but that's not the most important thing. And the students find out that first explaining the extenuating circumstances to the professor might, make the professors easily understand your situation, what you are struggling against, and also make leeways for you, right? And then explaining the time frame, so how much more time do you need for the professors to give you so that you can actually complete the assignment. That would also be a key information that you want to put in the email, right? And sometimes students find out that promising the professor that you are not abusing the policy and you are actually taking this class seriously, you are working very hard, using previous examples to show that, okay, so now you are just having a hard time and it's not a repeated situation, it's an extenuating circumstance that you are struggling, you need more help. And with the more time that is given through the extension, you will do a better job and you will deliver what you have promised, you will submit it before the new deadline. And including all those information in the email, then it is like in the combination, the effect might be most ideal, and the professors, you might be very successfully persuaded the professor to give you an extension. So that is called juncture conventions. And then students later find out that, okay, this is the most effective way of doing this, and then people start to follow the juncture conventions, and then this becomes a formulated kind of like way of asking for an extension. So that it describes the relationship between a rhetorical situation and a juncture. Because one particular situation repeat again and again and again, and people are smart, people start to figure out through trials and errors what is the most effective ways to achieve their purpose and to convey their message to their particular audience, and that become established genres and genre conventions. So that is the basic rhetorical term that I want to introduce. All right, so for the rhetorical appeals, we have to learn some basic terms. One is ethos, pathos, and logos. So look at the way this word is spelled. You can easily find out that, okay, ethos is about ethics, right? To build yourself, your image, to persuade your audience that you are a very trustworthy speaker or writer. You have a lot of authority in talking about this particular issue, right? So ethos is about ethics and credibility, and in the annotated bibliography, I have asked all of you to kind of like evaluate the credibility of each source, right? So you will know that how different authors achieve ethos in their text. And then pathos and then logos. Logos is about logic, right? Using hard facts, data, statistics, case studies, scientific experiment to give the audience, to persuade audience through the good logic chain, through nice reasoning. So dating back from Aristotle, we have been using logos to persuade our audience, right? So this is called logos. And the pathos. Pathos is about emotions, because we human beings, we are also emotional creatures, right? So a lot of times you can see like speakers, for example, the presidential campaign, they also use this kind of like emotional strategies to appeal to people's, like emotions, whether it's happiness or fear or hope or, like anxiety. A lot of times when you can successfully arouse certain emotions from the audience, they might be more prone to take your stance or take the actions that you want to persuade them to take. All right, so how do you achieve kind of ethos? So when you are analyzing the text that you have chosen, you can think about, so did they only use the credible, reliable sources to help the author build the argument, right? And did they use good citation styles, right? Those are actually good ethos to persuade the readers that you are a trustworthy, you are an experienced author. And then sometimes good ethos is also like, I am not only selecting facts in a biased way, right? I state the opposing positions accurately too. I'm not deliberately misleading the readers, and that is also a good practice to build ethos, right? I'm not only telling my side of story, I'm telling both sides of stories, and let the readers choose, respect the reader's critical thinking ability. And also credibility is before any kind of talk shows or a speech, the host have to kind of like introduce our speaker, like this is Professor A and B. They have all kinds of like all kinds of publications, how many years of experience do they have in particular field of studies, their expertise, their work experience, right? All their titles is to show the audience or the readers of their credibility. It is also an effective way of building ethos so that the audience would think like, okay, this is someone that has something to tell us and I am willing to listen. And sometimes the tone and writing style could be also good ethos, right? So why do professors all ask students to check their grammars or grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes? Because, if you are reading a paper, it has very good argument, but it has all kinds of typos, then you'll start to question the authority or how serious is the publication or how professional is the reader, right? And logos, there are different kinds of reasoning, right? So inductive reasoning start from the observations and then we keep it open-ended, and then using the kind of experiment, the research findings, we are going to we are going to come to certain conclusions. And deduction reasoning is that we start from a hypothesis and then we use the research results to kind of like to find out whether the hypothesis is supported or not. And there are all kinds of logical fallacies that like it's bad logos, right? A lot of times, even in the presidential speech or all kinds of TV shows, we can see all kinds of logical fallacies. And like according to one particular researcher, there are actually 155 types of logical fallacies. And for pathos, this is like make your readers feel certain kind of emotions. This is the most humane way of appealing to the audiences. For example, one particularly good speech example would be the Winston Churchill speech as the Prime Minister to the House of the Commons. It is in one particular very important time-changing kind of like situation for England is for the Second World War, and as Winston Churchill as the Prime Minister, he has to persuade the House of Commons to take up arms and defend their own country, to boost the moralities, the morale, and then to give people hope. So one particular very famous line is, I will say to the House, as I said to those who have joined this government, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. This particular line is so famous that it has been repeated by many politicians. So this is something that is quite moving, right? So I, Winston Churchill, as a conscientious citizen, I have offered all that I have, blood, toil, tears, and sweat to defend my country. So what about you, right? So this is a very good example of using pathos. And then here, the second example is another good way of using pathos. We have before us many, many long months of struggle and of suffering. So this is causing a little bit anxiety, right? But this is also being honest. And then you ask, what is our policy? I can say, it is to wage war by sea, land, and air with all our might and with all the strength that God can give us to wage war against a monstrous tyranny. Monstrous tyranny is to kind of arouse this kind of hatred toward the enemy so that people can unite together, right? Never surpass in the dark, lamentable catalogue of human crime, resentment, hatred, toward the enemy to boost the morale of the English people, right, the British people. That is our policy. You ask what is our aim, I can answer in one word. It is victory. Victory at all cost. Victory is better for terror. Victory, however long and hard the road may be. For without victory, there is no survival. This is also to give people hope. This is to kind of like give people arouse this kind of like courage in the people, right? So victory, we are going to achieve victory at all cost. So when a prime minister is delivering the strong message with confidence, then like this achieves the utmost kind of effect of pathos. And all right, so the next we are going to talk a little bit about genre as a key rhetorical concept. Next week we are going to talk a little bit more and more, and we are going to use different examples to understand genre as a key rhetorical concept, right? So genres, when we talk about genres, we know like, okay, so music genres, right? Country music, R&B, rap music, rock music, right? There are all kinds of genres. And for literature students, they will be like, okay, I know genres. I go to bookstore, there are romance, there are horror, comedy, tragedies, all kinds of, teenage novels, right? There are all kinds of genres. But in the composition, in the rhetorical composition setting, we actually define genre in a very different way. We view genre as a category of composition that is formed in response to recurring rhetorical situations. So think about the example that I have used, like in today's lecture, right? So asking for extension. This is a repeated rhetorical situation that happens again and again, and people have to use a particular kind of composition to respond to this situation to help them achieve their goals, right? So for each genre, it has a recognizable pattern for providing specific kinds of information. For example, using an email, addressing the professor, providing specific kinds of information is like, what are you going through? What is the external circumstances you are going through? Why do you need the extension? How long of an extension do you need? And also, promising the professor that you will actually deliver what you have asked for, and you are not going to abuse the policy, right? All right, so for genre conventions, there are certain key components. For example, the first genre convention would be modes. So, for example, linguistic mode, visual, oral, spatial, gestural. So for linguistic modes, the text-based artifact is going to solely use linguistic mode. For example, the academic peer-reviewed journal that you use for writing project 1 or a book chapter, they usually only use like linguistic, right? But if you are going to a movie theater, you are watching a movie, then of course there are linguistic, because uh, there are captions, there are all kinds of like text that is used in a movie. They also use visual and oral and spatial and gestural to achieve certain effects, right? And after the modes, we also have medium. Medium, so for modes, there are only 5 large categories, but for the medium, there are smaller categories. For example, letters, infograph, paintings, charts, etc. And for the genre conventions, there are also styles. There are casual styles, there are serious styles, there are also like design elements, what color they use. For example, if you're analyzing a website design, color, font, format, visuals, visual hierarchy, you can analyze all kinds of design elements. There are also structures. For example, how is an academic paper structured? And there are also limitations and expectations that are generated from the genres. For example, if you are buying a poetry book, there are certain expectations you want to see in this particular poetry book. And if you open the book, you see that this is actually a novel. There are all kinds of plots, dialogue. You will be very frustrated. You'll be surprised and even frustrated because it defies the genre conventions and defies your expectations. And genre constraint is also called limitations, is that there are certain things that for one particular genre it would be a little bit hard to achieve. All right, so at the end of today's lecture, let's think a little bit about turning one very famous franchise is Harry Potter movie to a Broadway show. That would show you what you want to consider about the different kind of genre conventions, right? So think a little bit. If you are a director and you are asked to change the Harry Potter movie to a Broadway show, what would you consider? What would you take into consideration? And I'm pretty sure that you are going to think about the genre constraint a lot, right? So genre constraint for a Broadway show versus a movie. For example, for movies, we can do lots of shots, right? We can, if the actor is not performing well, we can do it once more and again and again. But for Broadway shows, it's live theater, right? If you make a mistakes, you cannot just, use the editings or use the post-production to select the best angle, the best shot. So everything have to happen live. And then another genre constraint for Broadway show is that everything is happening right in front of the audience, right? For the movies, actually a lot of times movies happened in front of the green canvas, and a lot of the special effects, for example, the dragon blowing fire, there are all those magical effects, is achieved through the computerized post-production, right? It is made with, using the technologies that is not kind of available for the live theater. So how do you kind of like recreate this kind of magical effects? That is the most appealing part. That is what makes Harry Potter franchise, Harry Potter series so very fascinating and appeals to millions of fans, right? How do you recreate it without it looking fake, right? So that is a genre constraint that you have to think about, because movies and Broadway shows, live theater, they have different kind of genre constraint and genre affordances. That means that there are certain things that each genre can easily achieve, and some parts that this particular genre constraint, like makes it a little bit harder to achieve. For example, when you are comparing an academic paper with, for example, a movie clip. So for our academic article, it uses text as the sole medium for conveying ideas, right? So what is the genre of affordances? So you can use a lot of words. You can make very in-depth analysis on one particular thing, right? You can build a logical chain, step by step, and then come to the conclusion, right? But for academic papers, it's a lot less entertaining than a movie clip. And why is that? Because you cannot use visual aid, sound effect that, like the multimedia, like kind of like, for example, the movie can certainly achieve, right? So a lot of times movie can be more entertaining, it is more straightforward, it has all kinds of visual stimuli that can keep the audience interested, right? So for writing project 2, if you're comparing a movie clip with a kind of academic journal, you can point out what are the strengths and what are the constraints that each genre face, right? So for movies, it is a lot entertaining, it can keep the audience engaged, but it might not be as in-depth as a kind of academic paper, right? So for researchers, if you are doing the research finding, you are showing the research findings, a lot of times it is harder for you to do a movie, right? You have to write a paper showing all those figures, charts, the data, methodology, how you conduct the experiments, what is the sample size, and what is the final conclusion that you have achieved. And only through academic papers can you achieve that. But for a movie, sometimes it's like entertaining, it's genuinely educative to the audience, it is fun. So, like different genres can achieve different kind of effects. So that is basically the goal of writing project 2, is for you to compare two artifacts across genres so that you will have a better understanding of rhetorical strategies and also genre conventions and how different genres, how the composers or the writers use different genres to achieve very different goals. And then after learning that, for writing project 3, you as the composer, you as the writer yourself, you are going to choose 3 genres to compose your own campaign. So learn from writing project 2, you will find out that, okay, so maybe I will use that particular genre to achieve certain effects. And those 3 genres in combination with each other, they can achieve different kind of goals so that you can make a multi-dimensional, very effective and appealing campaign for writing project 3.